Good morning, friends. The subject of my talk this morning is what I have learned in monastic life. This is the third part of my talk on the same subject. I've been a monk for about 63 years, and what I have learned, I sometimes want to share this with my friends. And other than that, some have requested me also to talk to them about what I have learned in my monastic life. First I can mention one thing. Then I was an novitiate monk, just newly joined the order, monastic order. Then I was in the center which is in Shillong, the city of Shillong. It was the capital of Assam in British India. And a beautiful city, 1 mile high. There are centers we call ashramas in India. So that is the Shillong ashrama. And when I joined the monastic order as a monk, I joined the Shillong ashrama. Practically I had grown up there in this city. And then there is a few swamis there. One of them was Swami Bhuteshanandaji. By training, he was a medical doctor. And as a monk, when he was made a Swami, that means after taking his final vows in monastic life, he became a Swami. At that time he was in Shillong ashrama. And Shillong ashrama used to run a clinic, free clinic, or what we call in India, dispensary or whatever, something like a mini hospital. And for the poor people, they wouldn't have to pay anything. And he was in charge of that clinic. The room where I stayed in the ashrama was very close to his room, and we had only 2.5 bathrooms in that building. And when Swami Bhuteshanandaji used to use the bathrooms, he used to keep them meticulously clean after using. And his room was very small and he didn't have many possessions, but everything was put in a very orderly fashion. He was extremely disciplined in everything. So from him I learned how to lead a disciplined life. I also learned to keep everything in proper order in the room where I stay. And then that has been my habit of so many years. I also, if I use the bathroom, after my use, I make sure that it will be ready for use by the next user. So I keep it ready, completely ready. And all these things I learned mainly from Swami Bhuteshanandaji. And some members of our Vedanta centers center in Seattle. This said to me, and particularly one member said to me that, and that member watches TV. She said to me, "You are just like one character on our TV." And the TV series is named Mr. Monk. And it was apparently very popular. And Mr. Monk was very disciplined and everything he would keep in an orderly fashion. That's why he said, I remember him by seeing you. All right. Why the name Monk was given to that actor, I do not know. Perhaps some other monks also are like me. And the person who introduced that TV series, he must have known such a monk. Anyway, so Swami Bhaskarananda taught me discipline. He's extremely disciplined. Eventually he had to be in charge of our center, which is in England. It is not too far from London. It is in a place called Bourne End. And the place is pretty picturesque. And the ashrama, or the center there, had a fairly large property with trees, grassy lawns and so on. And everything was kept in perfect order by Swami Bhaskarananda. So I learned from him. And there was one gentleman, he lived in Canada, and he came to know me. I think he was in British Columbia, just nearly 300 or 400 miles away from Seattle. And he came to live with us. He was unmarried. He was a good man, very honest man. And he got interested in Vedanta, mostly by reading some books or something. And he came here. He said to me, "Swami, whatever you ask me to do, I will do it." And he had the habit of smoking many cigarettes every day. So he is not alive anymore, so I can mention his name. His name is Fred Wright. And then I said to him, it is not good to smoke too much. So if you can reduce it, that will be better. So reduce it every day. Then in a matter of days you will be able to get rid of this habit. He said to me, "Swami, I give it up, give smoking up right now." He thought that he could do it, but no, he couldn't do it. His desire to smoke was so great, he had acquired the habit of smoking tobacco. One day, he went with one of my brother monks to a shopping mall. And then my brother monk went on buying things, and Fred Wright was with him. He was not always with him. He just went there with him. when the time came for returning home, my brother monk couldn't see Fred there. Then he saw that Fred was with some policemen. The policemen had arrested him because he was found to do shoplifting. What did he shoplift? Some packet of cigarette. So my brother monk went to the policeman and talked to him, and he was released anyway. So he could not give up his habit of smoking. Habits die hard. Had he gone through severe discipline for many, many, many years, spiritual discipline, then he would be able to stick by what he had decided to do. He told me, I give up smoking right now. He could have done that. So discipline is something which I have seen in monastic life among some senior monks. Having chanted the holy name of God for years and years, their minds came under control. Whatever they would tell their minds, the minds would do that. Their minds would do that. And I also saw the monks, how neat and tidy they are. Just like Swami Bhaskarananda. So this is something I learned, discipline. Another thing I learned from Swami Bhaskarananda, who eventually became our president. He was a saintly soul. Swami Bhaskarananda was at that time the General Secretary of the Ramakrishna Order. That means our monastic order is called Ramakrishna Order, Ramakrishna Mission. He was the General Secretary. So he had to deal with the heads of our branch centers all over India and abroad. And that was a time when flu attacked India. And he had an attack of flu. So for 3 days he had fever and all. Then he got better. And he started working in his office. Then one Swami, his name was Swami Bhaskarananda. He was the head of one of our centers in the city of Calcutta. He was the head of the Udbodhan Center, we call it. That is one of the publishing centers that we have in India. Udbodhan Center publishes mostly Bengali books. And there is the Madras Mutt. That center publishes English books. Like that, these are some mainly publication centers, other than other duties which those centers perform. They give service to people. And so Swami Bhaskarananda came for some work to get guidance from the General Secretary, and the General Secretary was Swami Bhaskarananda, as I have already told you. He saw Swami Bhaskarananda working and sitting in his office, and Swami Bhaskarananda said to him, "Revered sir, I heard that you had an attack of flu. So how are you now?" And Swami Bhaskarananda said, I am a monk. I should not care for these minor illnesses. I should not stop working due to some minor illnesses. Then he asked Bhaskarananda Swami, "How do you know that a monk is ill or well?" Bhaskarananda Swami was intelligent. He said, "Revered sir, you please tell me how to do it." Then Swami Bhaskarananda said, "If you see that the monk is lying in bed and unable to lift his head from the pillow, then know that he is ill. But if you can sit up on the bed, then know that he is well. He should be able to do his work." So from this I learned that we should be serving the Lord without caring for our minor illnesses. This is what I learned. And one of you who have been watching this program said to me, "Swami, why don't you talk about my Guru, Swami Bhuteshananda?" Swami Bhuteshananda became our president. At that time he had to give spiritual initiation to many people. And this lady got spiritual initiation from him. "Why don't you talk about him?" So I will talk about him a little today. Swami Bhuteshananda was a disciple of Swami Saradananda. And Swami Saradananda was very calm by nature. And his brother monks sometimes would say that he is like the mud fish, his blood never becomes warm. That is an Indian expression. So Swami Bhuteshananda was like that. Yes. Despite his problems, he would not be perturbed at all. And I lived with him at the headquarters office for nearly 12 years. And I knew him when I was a little boy. Because Swami Bhuteshananda was at that time the head of the ashram of the Ramakrishna Order in Shillong, and also Cherrapunji, I think. He was very simple in his habits. He never rode a bus because this center there did not have that much money, and he rode a bicycle. And he had to ride the bicycle on those hilly roads. I saw him at that time as a little boy. He used to invite people. This center had the celebration of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday once a year and so on. At that time, other people would be invited and they would be given food. Food means something called khichuri, made with rice and pulses. That would be given. And so one day, as a little boy, I was sitting in the office of Dr. Manoranjan Goswami, who was our very close relative, and he lived just next to us. So I would sometimes go to his office and sit there as a little boy. Then I saw Swami Bhuteshanananda come there. He got off from his bicycle and came to Dr. Manoranjan Goswami and said to him, I have come here for an invitation. Dr. Goswami said, what other function the Vedanta Center is going to have that you have come to invite? And Swami Bhuteshanananda said, no. We have come to invite ourselves to your home. Then he explained that a Swami, a guest had come from Calcutta and he was about to leave. So he thought that one day at least that Swami should be given some better food, because the center didn't have money. So then hearing that Swami, Dr. Goswami was very pleased. He says, I'll be very glad and honored if you all come and eat. That's what I noticed. And Swami Bhuteshananda didn't have any craving for name, fame, power and position. He knew Sanskrit very well. He was a great scholar in Sanskrit. Most probably, if I am right, he had his master's degree in Sanskrit or something. He knew Sanskrit very well. But he never wrote a book. And he was very knowledgeable about Hinduism and Hindu scriptures. But he never wrote a single book or even an article as far as I know. Because he had no craving for name, fame and power and position. His talks were not academic talks. In universities, the professors are asked to give academic talks. The talks will indicate how many books the professor had studied. And there is also a saying that you should write books in universities. But Swami Bhuteshanandaji did not have any such wish. He would not give academic talks. And Swami Gambhiranandaji, Gambhirananda was an author. He used to serve the order by translating books from Sanskrit to Bengali and English. And he would ask Swami Bhuteshananda about the meanings of some Sanskrit terms. So Swami Bhuteshananda would help him. And Swami Bhuteshananda was humble. His humility was wonderful. He never tried to prove to anybody that he was even a Swami. He is to be respected by people. Very humble. And he had a good sense of humor also. And he had the great ability to love everybody. Everyone. nobody was an exception. I talked about his sense of humor. In our monastic order, only such humor is appreciated which does not hurt anybody's feeling. So his humor was that way. And he has the ability to love everybody. When I was sent to work here in this country, then some devotees of Japan, they had bought a house and they wrote to the headquarters that we have heard that Swami Bhaskarananda is going to America as an assistant to Swami Bhuteshanandaji. So on the way, please ask him to stop in Tokyo. And we have bought a house in Zushi, some miles away from Tokyo. And we want that he should come and inaugurate that house or bless that house. That's why on the way I had to stop in Japan. First I had to go to Osaka because there was a person who had been initiated by Swami Madhavananda, I think, and he used to run a Vedanta center. From there I was brought to Zushi, to that newly bought house. I said to them, Sri Ramakrishna has decided to be in this house and help his children here. So who am I to dedicate it? Let us dedicate it to him. That's how that center started. And I had to go there on invitation and stay there usually for a month or so. That I did for at least 15 years. And at that time the center started growing. And then the devotees had heard about spiritual initiation. And they asked me to give them spiritual initiation. Because they knew that a Swami could do that. But I was reluctant, I did not feel, and I was quite young at that time. So there was one gentleman, an Indian merchant, he used to pay money for me to go to India from Japan and come back. He was very generous. So during one of my visits to India, I met Swami Bhaskarananda, who was president of our order at that time. He was in Bombay. And I told him that the devotees of Japan had been pestering me for giving them spiritual initiation. But I don't feel that I should initiate anybody. But Swami Bhaskarananda said, why not? You give initiation. You are entitled to do that. So I explained to him, I feel like it is against my grain now to give. I am not mentally ready to play the role of a guru. Then he said, all right, I will see. Then he went back. Then he asked Swami Bhuteshananda, who was vice president, I think at that time, to go to Japan. That's how Swami Bhuteshananda started coming to Japan. And he gave initiation, spiritual initiation to quite a few devotees. And he used to come and stay at the Joshi Center. And Joshi Center, I had acquired another building by then. And according to my request, that building was inaugurated by Swami Bhuteshananda's visit. And So one, speaking of his ability to love everybody, so one of our devotees in Seattle, he wanted to visit Japan. So I think I must have given him a letter of introduction saying that he was a devotee of the Seattle Center. And then he went to visit Swami Bhuteshananda. He was at that time in Japan. But Swami Bhuteshananda was in his room, the door of his room was closed. But anyway, nevertheless, he was informed that a particular gentleman had come from Seattle and wanted to meet him. Then Swami Bhuteshananda, after a little while, opened the door of his room and allowed this gentleman to go and visit him. And Swami Bhuteshananda had known me from my childhood. That's why he would call me by my pre-monastic name. My pre-monastic name was Jyoti. So he would call me Jyoti. And then when the gentleman entered Swami Bhuteshananda's room, Swami Bhuteshananda said to him, I wanted to see you because you are dear to Jyoti, and Jyoti is dear to me, he said. Actually, everybody was dear to him. I can say that. He was sort of love personified. Such was Swami Bhuteshananda. And he thought that I was childlike, which indeed I was when I was in India. After coming here, I had to change myself. And one day, when he was Assistant General Secretary, and I was working at the General Secretary's office, he had to go somewhere by plane, and so by a cab we went to the airport. And the plane was not ready to leave, so we had to wait there for some time. So I sat with him at the airport. And there I saw one white couple, apparently husband and wife. They were waiting for their flight. And then the husband bought a cup of coffee or something and gave that to his wife. And the wife drank part of that coffee, and still there was some coffee in that cup. She offered that cup to her husband, and her husband started drinking from that cup. That amazed me because I grew up in India, and there if a person drinks or eats something from a plate or a cup, then the leftover food should not be given to anybody else. That is the rule. And I was amazed to see that leftover coffee or whatever drink that was given by his wife to her husband. And the husband started drinking it. That really amazed me. I said to Bhuteshanandaji, Maharaj, that lady drank from that cup and has given that cup to her husband, and her husband is drinking from it. It was a strange thing for me. And Swami Bhuteshanandaji smiled at me and said, Jyoti, you are still a child. So he looked upon me as a child. And he'd never be perturbed. Once one younger Swami who had been sent to give relief to some people in India or organization gives relief to people who are suffering from natural disasters or famine or something. And then that younger Swami came to Swami Bhuteshananda and started talking to him. And this younger Swami unfortunately was arrogant by nature, it looks like. And he started talking to Swami Bhuteshananda as though in a scolding way. And we were there in the next room, we could hear him talking that way. And we were amazed that Swami Bhuteshananda was not reacting to that at all. He treated that monk very calmly, and then that monk left. He was unperturbed. Eventually that monk, after some years, left the order, and he had a big ego, it looks like. That's why he could not be in the ego-crushing machine, which is the Ramakrishna mission. And he started his own organization. So such was Bhuteshananda Swami. And I learned something from another saintly Swami of our order. His name was Swami Shantananda. He was a disciple of the Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi. And he was of a very calm nature and would engage himself in spiritual practices. And he had done that for most of his life. And so when he was old, he had to lie in bed, and then some attendant Swami was there. He would read some holy book loudly so that he could hear that book. He had memorized the entire Bengali Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's a big book. And when that Swami would make a mistake in reading, then the Swami Shantananda would correct him. And one day they were reading about the Anahata Dhani, that means that those whose minds have become very pure, they can hear a sound, which is like the sound of Om. Om means God. Continuous sound. Om, Om, Om. And then this Swami was reading that part out, and Swami Shantananda was hearing that. Then the Swami was reading, he said, is it really, can really one hear this sound? Then Swami Shantananda, who would really speak about his own spirituality, he said, yes, I can hear it. I hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. So the scriptures say that those who hear that sound all the time, they are at a very high level of spirituality. And so there was one devotee, he was at the headquarters office then, a relatively young monk, and the devotee came to me as I was in the office and said, I went to Swami Shantanandaji and asked and requested him to give me spiritual initiation. But he said, no, I don't give spiritual initiation. Go to our president, Veereswarananda. So he was upset because Swami Shantananda had not agreed to his request. And then he came to me and said, what shall I do? How shall I approach Swami Bhuteshanananda for spiritual initiation? I've been going to Swami Shantananda for quite some time. Now he wants me to go to Swami Bhuteshanananda. Then I said to him, go and tell the attendant of Swami Bhuteshanananda that Swami Shantananda had asked you to have initiation from him. And he did that and he got the initiation. After initiation he came to me. He was very happy. And he came to thank me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, he said. Swami Shantananda was a highly evolved saintly Swami. But he would not give any spiritual initiation. And it is a rule of our order also, that unless the president asks anyone to give spiritual initiation, that monk will not give initiation. So I have already spoken for 40 minutes. I think it is a good time to stop. I have learned many other things, but I will talk about that later maybe. Or just a little bit, let me talk. After I was sent to the United States, I had to learn how to drive. And there was one brahmachari in our Seattle center. He taught me how to drive. And I was able to get the driver's license at the first chance. They gave me the license. And that was Brahmachari James taught me how to drive. But there was one Swami in our Hollywood Center. His name was Swami Krishnananda. Swami Krishnananda, when on invitation I would go to that center, and I had been there many times, he used to drive me and Swami Swahananda. And he used to drive me from Hollywood Center to Santa Barbara Center. It's quite a distance. It takes at least more than an hour to go there. I forget the time. But he would be driving at that time. And Los Angeles area, the traffic was very crowded by cars. And he taught me how to drive a car carefully on such a street. Swami Krishnananda taught me. And Swami Chidrupananda was an elderly monk in the San Francisco Vedanta Center. He taught me something. When I was sent to this country, I first went to San Francisco Center, because in charge of that center was Swami Prabodhananda, and I knew him in India. And before coming to Seattle, I wanted to learn a few things about how to work in this country. Then I decided to come to San Francisco Center first. So I went there. And Swami Chidrupananda was a very elderly Swami. He taught me American table manners. He showed me how to put the fork where and all these things. I knew British table manners, but American table manners are different. He taught me everything. And I have been following that since. After teaching me, he said, you are going to Swami Bhuteshanananda, but he doesn't follow American table manners. He mentioned that to me.